Certainly, they're leaving lots of questions that do need answers. Our final speaker in this part of the meeting is Bruce Lay, who's a town planner and architect. Bruce has spent many years working in Sydney as a town planner and architect, and more recently he's been concentrating on heritage architecture and in Newtown in particular. Bruce.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention the Herald ran a story today trumpeting the economic success of Sydney. If you saw it, Sydney's running away with 4.5% a year, I think, slightly ahead of Melbourne, thank goodness. And the country area is stagnating. So we're talking about two economies. And I'd like to examine that reason why Sydney is being successful. And I'd argue that, and I think there's the evidence for it, that the core of the city is even more successful at generating creative hubs and so on than the rest of the city. And we have to put that down to the aggregation of villages that promoted by the City Council and so on. I just wanted to quote from my submission to the M5, the runaway economic success of Central Sydney is no accident. It has been achieved by wise planning centred on the quality of the public domain, walkability and making people the centre of places. The car has a limited role in a diverse and dense modern city. Otherwise, it is hugely destructive. It divides. It is not a the joiner it purports to be. One of the other fallacies is about designing a city to maximise, to facilitate across-city movements. It permeates the through traffic versus the local traffic. That's an assumption that needs to be questioned. Why are local movements less important or less valuable than crosstown movements? And we all know that the impact of putting an arterial system is it tends to dislocate local movements, make them longer and slower and so on. So that's one of the assumptions that needs to be challenged. The other thing is the opportunity cost of what they are doing. They're using up huge amounts of urban land in the process that could be used more productively, and a case in point is the St Peters interchange, which is taking up about 14 hectares of land, slightly smaller than Sydney Park, and not very different in size to the Green Square Town Centre, which is proposed to house 22,000 people and about 10,000 jobs. So, I mean, we want, if growing the city is the agenda, and I can understand why a lot of people want to live here, particularly living in the ring, then we have the opportunities to do it if we don't squander them on this hugely inefficient use of land, because we know that the capacity of PT is much higher than using the car. I've got too much stuff here. It's not just about money. It's a huge waste of building stock, which may be ordinary, that may be heritage, but it's still a sum of the parts. It's protecting the character of this place. And we all know about crossing narrower versus wider roads. We all know the threat that there was to King Street when I came here in about 1978. They were threatening 24-hour clearways, which would have destroyed Newtown. So 2 lanes versus 4 lanes versus 8 lanes, that makes a huge difference to the workings of a place where people and pedestrians should be dominant. I worked for Leichhardt for 25 years as a strategic planner, and when we were redoing our planning system under the duress of state planning, because they wanted to pump up the density everywhere, and they were resisting the introduction of broad-based heritage conservation areas, whole suburb conservation areas, which Leichhardt has. We proved that most of the consolidation that was occurring in Leichhardt through that period was within the proposed heritage conservation areas, because that's where people also want to be, and that there are ways of doing those things without destroying the collective value of a suburb and the identity of a neighbourhood. I think some of you might remember the freeway system that was proposed for Sydney in the 70s, and fortunately Neville Wran realised that that was not going to be very popular and abandoned it. We could do with a few more pragmatic politicians of that sort now. Thank you.